Well, if I die in the combat zone,
If I die in the combat zone,
box me up and ship me home.
box me up and ship me home.
Pin my medals up on my chest.
Pin my medals up on my chest.
Tell my mama I done my best.
Chapter 7, Sparrow Hawk. The beginning of 1969 saw significant changes in U.S. leadership, with Richard M. Nixon taking over as president from Lyndon B. Johnson and General Creighton W. Abrams replacing General William Westmoreland as head of military operations in Vietnam. General Abrams prioritized training and equipping the South Vietnamese forces, shifting away from previous strategies like search and destroy to clear and hold and win hearts and minds programs. However, General Raymond Davis, 3rd Marine Division commander, believed that winning the hearts and minds of the South Vietnamese was futile if the NVA controlled the countryside. In the mountainous regions of northern I Corps, there were few villages to pacify, and the 3rd Marine Division's focus was preventing North Vietnamese troop penetration across the demilitarized zone and the Laotian border. This strategy aimed to disrupt NVA supply lines and prevent them from establishing a strong presence in the region. As the patrols ventured deeper into the mountains, they encountered numerous challenges, including booby traps, ambushes, and harsh weather conditions. However, their efforts paid off as they continued to uncover more enemy caches and gather valuable information on the enemy's activities. In late January, the patrols reported a significant increase in enemy movement and activity near the border. This information was crucial in alerting higher command and coordinating a response to potential enemy attacks. Colonel Grogan and his team from the 4th Marine Regiment worked tirelessly to prevent a potential North Vietnamese offensive, and their diligent efforts were instrumental in achieving this goal. Grogan's new program of smaller patrols by the 4th Marine Regiment in the mountains had proven to be a strategic and effective approach in gathering intelligence and disrupting enemy operations in the region. His leadership and initiative were commendable, and the 4th Marines were better prepared to face any future threats because of his efforts. This led to several political implications. American military leaders inexplicably established rules of engagement that limited the number of personnel allowed in the DMZ at any given time. Whispers of tension filled the air around the Gulf Company area, hinting at a dangerous combat operation on the horizon. The Marines poised to rejoin our ranks were bubbling with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Some chatter hinted at a deployment to the notorious Ash Shao Valley, a dense jungle teeming with NVA forces, often dubbed the enemy's R&R haven. Meanwhile, other rumors floated about a return to Khe Sanh, this time with a mission to rebuild the base, an endeavor fraught with its own challenges. By January 25th, the buzz around Vandegrift Combat Base was undeniable. Gulf Company was making its way back from the bush. After enduring weeks of grueling treks through the mountainous terrains near the rock pile, they were finally returning. It was clear that something big was on the horizon. The 3rd Marine Division headquarters was gearing up for a new operation, and now I was about to dive headfirst into the heart of it. Jeff Olson extended a spine-tingling invitation for us to witness the arrival of the CH-46 helicopters at the landing zone, a momentous event signaling the homecoming of our future comrades. As we approached, the grandeur of the colossal Sea Knight choppers unfolded before us, their twin blades slicing through the air, a dance of precision and power. Hovering majestically over the airstrip, they descended with a grace that belied their massive forms, gently tilting their tail end down before easing the front nose onto the tarmac. The moment their back ramps lowered, a burst of activity ensued. Marines from Gulf Company, known affectionately as the Magnificent Bastards, disembarked with a rush of energy, their steps quick and eager. Corporal Olson's eyes were riveted on the Marines as they left the helicopters, his mind ticking off each member of his squad, a silent prayer escaping his lips for their safety. Their initial formation on the landing pad was a whirl of motion, a testament to the adrenaline of their return. But soon order emerged, and they were dismissed to their temporary quarters at Vandegrift, marking a brief respite in their storied journey. When Lou Fiore made his way over, their embrace was tight, but a chill ran through the air as Olson inquired about his friend Ralph Ike, a.k.a. Red. Red took a hit during patrol, Lou's voice cracked with emotion. An ambush. A Claymore mine got him. I'm so sorry, Jeff. He was one of the best. Trudging back to their company area, the air thick with grief, our somber trio shared a silent communion of sorrow. The lofty ideals of heroism now rang hollow in the face of such raw, unfiltered loss. Corporal Olson drifted back to his tent, his solitude a necessary refuge to begin processing the day's grim reality. As the hours passed, the loss of Ike weighed heavily on his entire squad. Jeff Olson seemed to be taking it the hardest, retreating to his tent and spending hours alone. The once lively and boisterous Marine had become withdrawn and distant. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Dan Wessler and I sat outside our tents, sharing a quiet moment of reflection, wondering what the future would bring. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, and we both jumped to our feet, racing towards Jeff's tent. We found him in a state of distress, his hands shaking and tears streaming down his face. It was clear that the loss of Red had taken a toll on him, and he was struggling to come to terms with it. Dan and I sat with Jeff, offering words of comfort and support. Slowly, Jeff began to open up, expressing his grief and allowing himself to be vulnerable in front of us. In the days that followed, the entire platoon rallied around Jeff, offering their unwavering support and understanding. They spent countless hours talking, sharing their pain, and finding solace in each other's company. The loss of Lance Corporal Ralph Ike had been a devastating blow, but it had also brought the platoon closer together, forging an unbreakable bond that would carry us through the toughest of times. And as we stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, we knew that they were not alone. We had each other, and that was enough to give us the strength to carry on. The next morning, Sergeant Al Lowe summoned all the new replacements to company headquarters, the air buzzing with anticipation. We gathered in front of his tent, eyes wide and ears keen, as he began to read off names and platoon assignments. Each of us strained to catch his words, meticulously deciphering his thick Samoan accent, while the testy sergeant barked the information with authority. Listen up, Marines. Here are your platoon assignments. Barbagallo, Ingalls, Weiss, Wagoner, 1st Platoon, Barnes, Wessler, Jefferson, 2nd Platoon, Getty, Shoup, and Wilson, 3rd Platoon. Fall out, Marines, and report to your new commanding officer. Dismissed. Disappointment washed over us as Dan Wessler and I realized we weren't in the same platoon. We parted with a heavy heart, pledging to stay connected no matter the distance. At least we were still in the same company. With a quick hug and a sincere wish for luck, we set off to meet our new comrades, ready to adopt our new platoons. As we embarked on our separate journeys, a wave of frustration washed over me. Dan and I had forged a strong bond, and I had hoped we would continue to have each other's backs in this unpredictable world. Yet, I understood that the military had its own agenda, and we were now heading into different directions. Determined not to let distance sever our connection, I made a mental commitment to reach out to Dan as often as possible. Our friendship was too valuable to let it slip away just because we were no longer side by side. I knew that maintaining our bond would be crucial as we navigated the trials and uncertainties that lay ahead in Vietnam. I reported to 2nd Lieutenant Walter Wooden, the commanding officer of the 1st Platoon, standing at attention with an air of nervous anticipation. The recent loss of Ralph Ike had cast a daunting shadow over the realities of Vietnam, amplifying my awareness of the lurking dangers. Now, I was on the brink of my first mission, surrounded by a seasoned platoon. After a swift exchange with Lieutenant Wooden, he offered me a nod and a curt welcome, a brief moment of acknowledgement before he turned back to engage with the men in the command post area. Sergeant Mark Greep, my new platoon sergeant, didn't roll out the red carpet for me. His gruff demeanor and a tongue that favored colorful profanity made him a standout, even among the no-nonsense drill instructors from my boot camp days. Sporting a sparse, bristly chin beard, he had earned the affectionate nickname Rock Ape Greep among the men. Patience was not in his vocabulary, and his confrontational manner made it clear that he meant business when barking out orders. "Where you from, boy?" Sergeant Greep demanded, eyes narrowing. "I'm from Quincy, Illinois, sir." "Sir, do I look like some dipshit, tit-sucking officer?" Greep spat a wad of chew, his gaze flicking disdainfully over to Lieutenant Wooden, who was too far away to catch Greep's insult. "Never heard of Sissy, Illinois. Is it by Chicago?" Greep chuckled, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, Sergeant Greep. It's closer to St. Louis." "Well, never have heard of it." With that frosty introduction, Sergeant Greep assigned me to the first squad, led by Corporal Norbert Peters, a tall farmer from South Dakota. At 29, he was the oldest Marine in our unit, and everyone affectionately dubbed him Pops. As soon as I met Corporal Peters, his warmth and easy demeanor immediately stood out. He welcomed me like a long-lost younger brother, not merely another fresh face in the humid madness of Vietnam. I was instantly thankful for such an experienced leader who genuinely cared about our well-being and consistently watched over us. "You can call me Pops. What do people usually call you? Or should we stick with Wagner?" "Well, it's Wagner, but some call me Wags. I'm good with anything," I replied. Pops chuckled and draped an arm around my shoulders, guiding me towards the tent that housed his squad. "Listen, Wags, I'm about to flood you with info. Don't hesitate to ask questions, all right? You've got a lot to soak up quickly before we head back out to the bush. Now, lay out your poncho and arrange all your gear on it, including personal items you plan to carry into the bush. I'll check in with the others and be right back to help you sort everything out." Reassured by Pop's meticulousness, I spread out my belongings on the rubber poncho. Among them was the bulky Polaroid camera I'd brought from home. When Pops returned, he immediately noticed it. "Okay, Wags, let's see what you've got here. Oh, the camera's too bulky for the bush. Next time, get someone to send you a disposable Kodak. It's lighter and you can just mail the film back home. Leave this Polaroid here in the rear area." He also suggested, "Ask your family for some pre-sweetened Kool-Aid. It helps mask the taste of the water here." Pop's advice was invaluable and held my full attention. "Let's get you rucked up. I'll show you how to adjust those straps for a better fit. Comfort is key out here, Wags." After Pops was satisfied that my rucksack was properly packed, he introduced me to the rest of the squad. Almost Pop's entire squad was made up of veteran Marines. Everyone seemed to get along, and I could tell Pops ran a tight outfit. I just hoped I would be able to pull my weight with these seasoned fighters. Although everyone seemed to accept me, it was very unsettling being the new guy. That fateful afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Sergeant Greep emerged from the command tent with swift, purposeful strides. His face was a mask of solemnity as he made his way directly towards our tent. Without a word, he gestured urgently for Pops to join him outside. The air was thick with anticipation as they engaged in a low, intense conversation just beyond the canvas walls. The rest of us tried to appear busy, but our attention was undeniably hooked on the muffled exchange. Moments later, Corporal Peters re-entered, the flap of the tent snapping sharply behind him. The change in Pops was immediate and unsettling. Gone was the composed leader we knew. In his stead, a man tinged with irritation and concern stood before us. Pops cleared his throat, commanding the room with a somber tone. "Listen up, First Squad," he began, his voice laced with a heavy dose of regret. "I've got some tough news to share. Effective immediately. We're on lockdown. First Platoon has been selected for an upcoming operation, and Captain Dwyer demands full readiness." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Yes, it's going to get cozy in here," he continued. "Some of you will be bedding down on the ground. No wandering off except for quick trips to the latrine. Meals will be served in the mess hall, but remember, we move as one unit. And forget any plans for the enlisted club or catching a flick at the base cinema tonight." His gaze swept over us, each man digesting the shift in our immediate future. "It's far from perfect, I know," Pops concluded. "But we need to stay sharp and ready. Our cohesion and focus during this time are crucial." The room filled with a mix of nods and quiet murmurs of agreement, the reality of our situation settling around us like a heavy cloak. Pop's words hung heavy in the air, a mix of disappointment and resolve etching his features as he looked over his men, ready to face whatever the night would bring. We were a team, and no matter the discomfort or the disruption to our normal routines, we understood the necessity of sacrifice for the sake of the mission ahead. Earlier that day, Sergeant Al Lowe had filled Sergeant Greep in on Captain Dwyer's departure to Quang Tri for a high-stakes meeting. He assured us that he would return with our long-awaited mail, but the promise did little to alleviate our frustrations. We all felt the weight of our situation, but we knew that orders were orders, and compliance was non-negotiable. The next morning, Pops took it upon himself to familiarize me with the art of cooking with sea rations. With a twinkle in his eye, he demonstrated how to craft a makeshift stove by puncturing holes in an empty cracker can using a can opener. Then, he fashioned a handle from the lid of an empty fruit can, transforming it into a makeshift coffee mug. Instead of relying on the standard blue heat tablet, he unveiled a nifty trick, a small piece of C4 explosive to rapidly heat my coffee. It was my inaugural cup of coffee in Vietnam, in fact, my very first cup ever. From that moment on, it became my morning ritual, a warm embrace against the chilly mountain air. When Sergeant Greep finally showed up with the mail, a wave of joy swept through our squad. Ah, the magic of mail call. In the dense jungles of Vietnam, amidst the relentless heat and the uncertainties of war, there came those rare moments that brought an oasis of joy, the arrival of letters from home. Mail. The call itself was enough to send a wave of anticipation through the ranks, but on this day, the excitement peaked. Pops tore open his letter, his hands slightly trembling, a big grin spreading across his face as he read the words from his beloved wife. "I'm a father to a new baby boy," he exclaimed, his voice a mixture of ponder and elation. The news electrified the atmosphere instantly. It was as if, for a moment, the war paused, and the dangers lurking beyond the encampment faded into the background. The entire squad rallied around Pops, clapping and throwing friendly jabs of congratulations. After months of him sharing hopes and dreams, worries and plans, the arrival of his son, Norbert F. Peters, II, was a joy not just for Pops, but for everyone. He proudly passed around a crinkled photo of the newborn, his eyes gleaming with pride. Discussions erupted among the men about the future, about home, about all the firsts Pops would experience once back. In true military brotherhood fashion, the squad decided this news warranted a celebration. Out came the treasured cans of pound cake and peaches, luxuries in such times and places. We sat, ate, and for a few precious hours, our spirits were lifted by the laughter and shared dreams of better days ahead. The camaraderie felt during these moments was deep, a testament to the power of good news and the resilience of human connections, even in the most challenging circumstances. Pops couldn't stop talking about the things he looked forward to teaching his son, the simple joys of playing catch, the art of fixing cars, and perhaps one day sharing tales of the bravery of the men he called brothers. His joy was indeed contagious. Even the toughest of the Marines had smiles on their faces, touched by the infectious happiness of a new father among them. I was elated to receive 2 letters from home, one from Mom and another from Dad. My father was brimming with curiosity, eager to know every detail about my life in Vietnam and my new unit. He asked what my barracks were like, completely unaware of the gritty realities of being in the infantry here. In response, I found myself scribbling away from a rather cramped 12 by 16-foot canvas tent, nestled deep within the rugged, untamed jungle of Vietnam. Captain Joseph M. Dwyer, freshly back from a strategic gathering in Quang Tri, swiftly convened his platoon leaders to debrief and strategize. In a room brimming with anticipation, he recounted his discussions with notable figures such as Lieutenant Colonel Joseph E. Hopkins and Colonel William F. Grogan, the stalwart leader of the 4th Marine Regiment. With the intelligence shared, Dwyer and his officers launched into an intense planning session, laying the groundwork for an upcoming mission that could tilt the scales in their favor. This tour of duty marked Captain Dwyer's second foray into the heart of Vietnam, a return driven by a poignant blend of duty and vengeance. Previously, he had distinguished himself as a platoon commander with the 9th Marines back in 1967. However, the tragic loss of a close comrade in early 1968 reignited his resolve. Fueled by grief and a thirst for retribution, Dwyer made an impassioned plea to rejoin the conflict. Despite initial resistance from his superiors, his tenacity knew no bounds. He managed to secure a seat on a military flight heading to Da Nang. Upon arrival, with no formal orders but a heart heavy with purpose, Captain Dwyer presented himself at the 4th Marine Headquarters in Quang Tri. His unexpected appearance initially earned him a severe reprimand and a threat of demotion from the incredulous commanding officer. Nevertheless, witnessing Dwyer's unwavering determination and understanding the depth of his loss, the commander grudgingly handed him the reins of Gulf Company. This assignment was not just a role. It was a chance for Captain Dwyer to honor his fallen friend and carve a path toward personal redemption and collective victory. Now, Captain Joseph Dwyer stood on the brink of a pivotal chapter in Operation Scotland II. If successful, he wouldn't just oversee the mission, he'd be in the trenches with his troops, driven by a fierce desire for retribution for the loss of his comrades. His moment of vengeance was drawing near, and with it a promise of intense combat for the Marines of Gulf 2-4. During a strategic huddle in Quang Tri, Lieutenant Colonel Hopkins handed down orders to Captain Dwyer: deploy 2 nimble patrols of Marines into the southern reaches of the demilitarized zone. This maneuver, dubbed Sparrow Hawk, aimed to provoke the NVA troops amassed across the DMZ into crossing over and clashing with the smaller, agile Marine units. Yet, this tactical ploy was often thwarted by the labyrinth of political red tape, barriers that ultimately compromised the U.S. grasp on victory. By the golden hue of mid-afternoon the following day, Sergeant Greep marshaled the 1st and 2nd squads right in the bustling heart of company headquarters. Captain Dwyer emerged, a half-burned cigar clenched firmly between his teeth, his dark eyes alight with a fierce excitement as he took in the sight of his battle-ready Marines. Trailing closely was the resolute figure of the 1st Platoon CO, 2nd Lieutenant Wooden. As soon as Sergeant Greep snapped everyone to attention, Captain Dwyer waved a casual hand, signaling us to stand at ease before he started his briefing. Listen up, 1st Platoon. You're the chosen ones for operation called Sparrow Hawk. Right now, as I speak, our elite Marine recon team is deep within the demilitarized zone, stealthily tracking down the North Vietnamese Army stronghold. Our intel suggests that the NVA is massing forces along the northern stretches of the DMZ. Once recon pinpoints their exact coordinates, they'll signal for you, our Sparrows, to swoop in and make the initial strike. This will pave the way for the Hawks, our main company forces, to deliver the crippling blow. Should the situation escalate, be prepared for the full might of our battalion to roll out. We're counting on you to disrupt their ranks before they can mount a significant offensive. Men, we're on the brink of preventing a major enemy push. Let's make history. Go give them hell, Marines. After the captain's fiery pep talk, he pivoted sharply, leaving Lieutenant Walter Wooden to marshal us for the impending combat mission. Reflecting on his words, I thought we might better be dubbed Bastard Bait rather than Sparrow. Indeed, while a sparrow could soar away, we seemed more akin to wriggling worms on a hook, irresistibly tempting the NVA to strike. We assembled our gear and proceeded to the base landing zone, each step heavy with the weight of the skipper's stern admonitions. As we settled by the runway, laden with our equipment, rifles, and ammunition, anticipation thickened the air. We waited for the helicopter that would hurl us to an unfamiliar destination. Beneath my facade of eagerness for glory, a visceral battle raged between bravery and fear. The imminent threat of combat intensified this turmoil, gnawing at my resolve. My stomach twisted in knots, emblematic of the inner conflict. Around me, the grave faces of my squad mates mirrored the grave risks of the venture we were about to undertake. Words were redundant. The charged silence spoke for itself. As if by divine intervention, I heard Dan Wessler's voice cutting through the tension as he neared our staging area. "Wags, I heard through the grapevine you guys were down here. Figured I'd come and keep you company for a spell. How's everything, Marine?" "Wessler, buddy, am I thrilled to see you. I bet you caught wind I'm stuck in a tight spot." "You'll pull through, Wags. You're too stubborn to let anything take you down. Heck, any bullet aiming for you would probably turn tail and flee, scared off by your battle-hardened baby face," Dan replied, his laughter a balm to the stress. "Really, Wessler, got nothing better to do than watch me sweat it out here?" "Well, I could be out back burning latrines, but I figured you'd be spewing more bullcrap over here." Dan's chuckle echoed, lightening the mood. Dan Wessler's timely arrival was a beacon of strength. His reassuring presence and hearty banter were just the salve I needed to soothe my fraying nerves. Without his steadfast support, I might have crumbled under the weight of my worries, teetering on the edge of despair. Dan, ever the faithful buddy, kept the conversation lively, diverting my mind from the looming threats as we awaited our aerial assault, codenamed Sparrow. Just then, the radio operator beckoned Lieutenant Wooden over with a wave. Anticipation crackled in the air as everyone awaited his report. After a brief exchange, Wooden clipped the handset back and declared, "Gear up, Marines. Choppers are en route. Recon's got a bead on the NVA." As if choreographed by fate, Captain Dwyer stormed in, his jeep kicking up a furious storm of red dust as it screeched to a halt. With an air of urgency, he summoned Lieutenant Wooden to his side, handing him 2 meticulously marked topographical maps. These maps, detailing patrol routes and critical checkpoints, were vital for the mission ahead. Dwyer explained that he would keep a vigilant eye on every move we made through his communications radio. As the final preparations buzzed around us, the officers ironed out the last few strategic details. With a firm nod, Captain Dwyer faced us, his voice cutting through the tense air. "It's time, men. Happy hunting, boys." Tension filled the air as 2 large CH-46 helicopters descended from the sky and landed in front of us. It was the first time I was near the chop-chop sound made from the rotors. This noise would haunt me for years. Corporal Peters grabbed my arm and shouted, "Get in the chopper, Wags, and sit across from me. You won't hear much inside, so watch for my hand signals." Before I sprinted to the helicopter, I looked back at Dan Wessler. He flashed a thumb up, but his wide eyes betrayed his unease. As I shadowed my squad leader toward the roaring helicopter, its massive twin rotors churned relentlessly above us. We ducked instinctively, the downdraft threatening to snatch my helmet right off, despite my hand clamped down on it. The blades, mere inches above, sliced through the air with a thunderous whump, 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 silencing any attempt at communication. Inside, we huddled across from each other, eyes wide with mute terror. The helicopter lurched skyward, its ascent almost vertical, then banked sharply, veering north toward the haunting expanse of the demilitarized zone. North of Con Tin, the scars of war were stark against the earth. Countless craters from American B-52 bombings pockmarked the landscape, transforming it into a surreal, moon-like terrain. Time seemed to stretch and bend aboard the chopper, turning what felt like fleeting moments into an agonizing 30 minutes of escalating dread. Each throb of the rotor blade sent a shiver through my spine, amplifying my fear to a crescendo until the helicopter began its stomach-churning descent, sending my heart hurtling into my throat. Pops, resolute as ever, deftly retrieved a fresh magazine from his bandolier, smacking it against his helmet with a sharp snap. A crisp, definitive call to arms for us to lock and load our weapons. As the chopper hovered just above the rugged terrain, it lowered the back ramp to a perilously short distance from the ground. With a commanding flourish, Pops raised his arm high before slicing it through the air, plunging out of the aircraft with unwavering resolve. We scrambled to the ramp, burdened by our heavy gear, and leapt into the murky abyss below, each of us silently invoking any higher power that we'd touch down safely. First man out of the helicopter, Pops began directing us into a defensive perimeter around half of the hilltop. He placed me to the northeast side of the hastily set defensive posture. There I knelt on one knee, pointing my rifle outward, all the time turning my torso as if it were mounted on a swivel, scanning the tree line for the enemy. As soon as we were out of the helicopter, it quickly flew away, and a second chopper began taking its place. As the last helicopter hovered over the hill, Second Squad jumped out and began fanning out across the opposite side of the perimeter. The ochre hues of the swaying sawgrass around us formed a stark, almost surreal backdrop against the formidable mountains that loomed ominously ahead. Without warning, a muffled thump ruptured the deceptive calm, quickly followed by two more. These were the harbingers of NVA mortar rounds, launched with deadly intent from a hilltop to the west. The first shell burst into the earth just 50 feet below, on the north side of our position, its violent explosion a grim herald of what was to come. Seconds later, another round slammed into the perimeter's edge, right where the second squad was pressed into the dirt, their bodies tense with anticipation. The third shell, a sinister whistling missile, tore through the air directly above me, detonating mere yards away. Instinctively, I pressed my face against the cold, unforgiving earth, my hands clamped over my helmet, muttering desperate prayers for safety. I wanted nothing more than to flee to better cover, but the barren landscape offered no refuge. All I could think in that terrifying moment was, God, please make it stop. But the hill was unyielding, as more thumps echoed from that same ridgeline, each followed by the eerie whistle of incoming death. Another explosion violently shook the ground, hurling rocks and dirt across my back as I clawed frantically at the earth, lying prone in absolute terror. In the thick of a pulsating battlefield, Gordon Winter's voice cut through the chaos, shouting, "Lieutenant, they're over there. I've spotted them. Right over there." Clutching determination in his eyes, he half rose on his knees, arms stretched out, fingers jabbing toward the distant hill to our west. Lieutenant Wooden, ever the epitome of calm under fire, peered over his meticulously folded contour map. His eyes darted between the paper and the landscape, seeking synchronicity. With precision, he located the enemy mortar crew at grid coordinates YD 314214. As he confirmed the position, his radio man extended the crackling handset towards him. Without hesitation, Lieutenant Wooden grasped it and relayed the crucial coordinates to Captain Dwyer with a clear, commanding urgency. "Golf 6, this is Golf 1-6, over," he said. Golf 6 designated company commander and Golf 1-6 platoon commander. "Golf 1-6, this is Golf 6, I read you loud and clear," Captain Dwyer responded. "We are under fire from enemy mortars at Yuma Delta coordinates, 315-214, over," Wooden reported. "Copy that. Yuma Delta, 315-214, over," Dwyer confirmed the coordinates. The skipper remained steadfast to his words, vigilantly manning his radio, tuned into the unfolding drama of his men in action. As time ticked by, Captain Dwyer's voice crackled through again, breaking the tense silence. "Golf 1-6, showtime is now operational. Stay low and hold your position. Over." "Roger that, Golf 6. Golf 1-6 out," came Lieutenant Wooden's crisp acknowledgement. Showtime wasn't just any call sign. It marked the presence of two formidable Marine F-4 fighter jets aboard the USS Hornet, lurking off the tempestuous shores of South Vietnam. A collective sigh of relief washed over us upon learning that Captain Dwyer had secured aerial backup. After reaching out to a forward observer perched on Signal Hill near Vandergrift, reinforcements were on their way. Ace fighter pilots, Showtime 116 and Showtime 118, soared to our aid. In a breathtaking display, the fighter jets descended with the swiftness and precision of hunting falcons. Closing in on the North Vietnamese stronghold, they unleashed their fiery payload. Two napalm bombs arced through the air, their trajectory mirroring a seesaw's unpredictable sway, before they slammed into the enemy encampment. The impact birthed a monstrous bloom of fiery orange flames, followed by dense black smoke, swallowing the enemy area in a devastating inferno. Escaping the clutches of such an overwhelming weapon seemed almost beyond the bounds of possibility. Relieved that the immediate threat had subsided, our two squads vacated the landing zone and embarked on a methodical march toward our designated night position, Checkpoint 1, as marked on Lieutenant Wooden's diligently prepared map. The adrenaline-pumping encounter with enemy mortars had left a nagging thirst clawing at my throat. As we hunkered down at our evening encampment, it dawned on me I had hastily consumed 2 of my precious 5 water canteens. A lapse in judgment I feared would soon come back to haunt me. No sooner had we reached our destination than we set to work furiously, wielding our e-tool shovels to carve out fighting holes in the stubborn earth. The recent brush with danger had sharpened my survival instincts. I dug with a fervor, a primal urge to create a deep haven of safety, propelling every motion. It was only the calm, grounding voice of my fire team leader, Lance Corporal Robert Lee, that snapped me out of my frenzied state, reminding me of the need to conserve energy for the challenges that lay ahead. As the sun gracefully sank below the horizon, the night sky transformed into a velvety canvas of deepening blackness. Our radio crackled to life, cutting through the static, delivering the pivotal update to our lieutenant. The recon Marines were requesting permission to enter our perimeter. Out of the thick green embrace of the jungle emerged these elite warriors, their hardened silhouettes stark against the softening light of the jungle's edge. The scene felt surreal. As they strode past, their unwavering gazes offered no clues to the dangers they had faced or the lurking threats still hidden in the shadows. The surrounding jungle appeared vibrant and attentive, seemingly aware of the palpable tension within our group. The presence of the recon Marines, exuding an air of steely resolve, was simultaneously reassuring and unsettling. They had navigated the perilous terrain with skill, yet we couldn't shake the gnawing question, what formidable enemy had they been dispatched to confront? After a brief whispered meeting with Lieutenant Wooden, the air thick with anticipation, the recon team readied themselves once more, their movements fluid and instinctive. With a few solemn nods and hushed exchanges, they melted into the inky blackness of the jungle, embodying the essence of fearlessness. We stood in the fading light, our hearts synchronized with the rhythmic pulse of the jungle, a stark reminder that tonight we were but pawns in a grander game, a game where shadows were larger than life, and every rustle could herald the unknown. Lieutenant Wooden's command to maintain full alertness throughout the night suggested that he had received concerning information. This required everyone to stay awake and vigilant. As a light rain fell, I sought shelter under my rubber poncho, trying to stay dry. Unidentifiable noises, combined with the steady rainfall, kept me on edge. It was a much more intense experience than standing watch at Vandergrift. Every sound we heard throughout the night could have been the NVA, keeping us on high alert. The next morning we embarked on my very first patrol, a mix of excitement and apprehension bubbling within me. Our mission was clear: navigate the ridgelines flanking the demilitarized zone, waiting for the enemy to either cross our path or vice versa. We split into two separate patrols, with Lieutenant Wooden commanding the second squad heading east, while Pops expertly guided his team westward. As we began our descent down a gentle slope, our patrol meandered through a tranquil meadow, the promise of a freshwater river gleaming ahead. Dark clouds loomed ominously overhead, and in a moment of questionable judgment, I decided to sport my flimsy plastic rain gear my Uncle Sherman gifted me, an ill-fated combo of bibbed pants and a jacket. Predictably, the delicate plastic succumbed to the ruthless grasp of thorny bushes and resilient shrubs, tearing at the most inopportune moments. When we finally reached our first rest stop, I sheepishly discarded the shredded remnants, triggering uproarious laughter from my squad. My rookie blunders in this unforgiving terrain transformed into a hilariously relatable moment for everyone, morphing my mishap into a shared chuckle that lightened the mood like a beam of sunshine breaking through the clouds. After we waded through the waist-deep river, anticipation surged within us as we prepared to tackle our first mountain climb. Upon reaching the summit, we stumbled into an open glen, blanketed with sawgrass that bent sideways under our determination. Without a second thought, I instinctively reached out to grasp the tall stems for balance, only to be met with sharp cuts that sliced into my palms, drawing blood and a swift lesson. Never grab at the sawgrass if you value your skin. After trekking for several hundred yards, we re-entered the dense triple canopy and followed a well-worn dirt path that spoke of previous travelers. This trail, frequently used by the NVA, was significantly easier to navigate. Aware of the lurking dangers, we proceeded with heightened caution, our senses sharpened to every sound and movement. The sights and smells of the jungle enveloped me in a bewildering embrace, like being plucked from reality and dropped into a scene from a vintage Tarzan flick at a nostalgic childhood matinee. Towering trees and various hardwoods ascended into the heavens, their tops obscured by smaller saplings and thickets jostling for space along the rainforest floor. Banana trees and leafy ferns painted the jungle in shadowy hues, lending an ominous ambiance that sent shivers down my spine. As we ventured deeper, the atmosphere thickened, growing darker and eerier. Birds squawked and monkeys screeched, creating a chaotic symphony of sounds as we trudged through their dominion, the uninvited guests in their vibrant world. Adding to my growing stress, the weight of my pack morphed into an unbearable burden, the rough canvas straps digging mercilessly into my shoulders. It seemed as if we never paused for a moment to catch our breath. Whenever we did stop, it was barely enough time to loosen my grip on the pack before we were off again. As the patrol plodded on, I found myself guzzling more and more water, my body's need for hydration outpacing my ability to replenish it. By late morning, I was down to my last full canteen, a stark reminder of my earlier choice to skip filling up at the river we crossed just hours before. The temperature climbed past 90 degrees by afternoon, the stifling humidity turning the air into a thick, oppressive blanket. Each step felt like a battle against the sweltering heat, and I couldn't shake the nagging thought, would this patrol ever come to an end? As I trudged through the jungle, a consuming sense of disorientation washed over me. In a moment of utter desperation, I found myself crying out to a higher power, pleading for relief from this torment. Please, God, just take me now. I can't bear this any long. It felt sacrilegious to question my Creator, but the weight of my struggle was unbearable. Each step became a battle, sapping my strength, and I feared the moment would come when I'd be on my knees, begging for God's mercy to pull me from this unbearable trail of misery. As we stepped into another clearing, a subtle humming noise whispered from above. Our eyes were drawn upward by the sleek silhouette of an observation airplane, a Cessna 02, its wings shimmering like liquid silver under the relentless sun. It glided majestically across the cloudless sky, circling slowly like a watchful protector. "Everybody look up. See that bird dog riding the winds," Lance Corporal Robbie Lee exclaimed, craning his neck to trace the plane's lazy arcs above us. Pops chuckled, shading his eyes with a hand. "Seems he's been keeping tabs on us for hours. Maybe he's our guardian angel, eh?" His smile, a blend of reverence and amusement, revealed a comforting thought. We weren't alone out here. "Hey, Pops, if we don't find water soon, we're going to start losing men to the heat." Lee's voice cracked as he pleaded, the urgency clear in his tone. Pops, a seasoned veteran of countless grueling marches, knew all too well the dire consequences of dehydration. Today's patrol, under the unforgiving sun, had pushed us to our limits. Corporal Peters, ever resourceful, consulted his map, his eyes scanning for salvation. Near relief sparked hope as he discovered a river, aka Blue Line, was merely a quarter-mile down the steep ravine beside us. However, the path down was anything but straightforward. Our squad battled through an almost impenetrable maze of jungle vines and lush vegetation, our machetes swinging rhythmically to clear a path. The team's progress, hindered by the dense undergrowth, was painstakingly slow. When we finally broke through the relentless jungle foliage, our bodies were drenched in sweat, muscles aching from the descent. Before us lay the Benhai River, deceptively modest in size, more akin to a large creek than the lifeline I had envisioned. Yet, the sandy stretches along its banks hinted at the river's capacity to swell into a formidable stream during the wet season. Unknown to us, we were on the DMZ. This river marked more than just a natural divide. It was a thin blue line between survival and entering North Vietnam. One after another we approached the water source, vigilant and on edge as the others stood guard. In the midst of my turn, as I stooped to fill my first canteen, reality shattered with a thunderous explosion, a force that catapulted me, a mere puppet in the wind, at least 6 feet through the air. Overwhelmed by chaos, I spiraled helplessly into an eerie chasm of darkness, succumbing to the silent embrace of unconsciousness. Directly above, the menacing shark-toothed visage of an OV-10 Bronco aircraft emerged from the clouds. This formidable gunship unleashed its fury, firing 70mm rockets from its wing pods, having tragically mistaken our patrol for NVA forces. The rockets tore through the riverbed with devastating accuracy, leaving all 14 Marines in our unit wounded, several of them critically. Sprawled across the sun-warmed sandbar, I was mistaken for dead. As chaos unfolded, those still mobile vanished into the jungle's dense embrace. Time blurred, a mix of minutes that stretched endlessly until consciousness crept back in, bringing with it a stark silence. My ears rang with nothingness, the world's soundtrack muted. In a panicked flurry, I inventoried my limbs, a wave of relief washing over me as I found myself whole. Yet shock was my shield against the pain, leaving me floating in a sand sea of sheer terror. The explosion had left my body completely numb, the human survival reaction to shock. Thankfully, the sandy bar bore the brunt of the rocket's fury, sparing my life by a hair's breadth. I was peppered with countless tiny shards of shrapnel across my face, arms, and legs, and unbeknownst to me, a metal shard the size of $50 was lodged in my buttocks. My clothes, drenched in blood, made my injuries look more horrifying than they actually were. When the initial shock began to ebb, a fiery sting set in wherever the shrapnel had invaded my skin. As I scanned my desolate surroundings, it seemed I was utterly alone. Shattered eyeglasses left my vision blurred, and the profound silence of sudden deafness compounded my disorientation. The relentless assault from the A-10 Bronco above intensified. With every attempt to move, I caught the pilot's attention. He unleashed the ferocity of his 7.62 millimeter miniguns. Terror gripped me as bullets stitched the earth, sending plumes of sand skyward, a deadly line advancing towards me. Miraculously, he missed. It seemed in that moment divine intervention was on my side. As the aircraft wheeled overhead for another pass, Mike Castle, our squad's machine gunner, emerged like a ghost from the mist. The lean, blond-haired Marine bided his time until the Bronco was a safe distance away, then dashed out to shepherd me to safety. "Wags, you all right, man? I thought you were a goner." Everyone did. "Quick, back to the jungle, dude. It's circling back around. Follow me. Let's bolt." Though deafness muffled his words, Castle's urgent gestures towards a denser part of the jungle were crystal clear. I watched helplessly as he sprinted back to where the rest of our group was huddled, but my will to survive quickly kicked into overdrive. Paralyzed with fear, standing was beyond me. Instead, I scurried on all fours, adrenaline fueling my every move. I aimed for the spot Castle had signaled, the pain from shrapnel in my flesh searing with each movement. Yet it was the fear that truly consumed me at that moment. When under the protective canopy of the trees, Mike Castle removed his helmet and handed it to me. "I won't be needing this anymore," he said, pointing to the bloody gash on his forehead. Taking position at our hideout's edge, he gripped his M60 with determination, poised to bring down the Bronco should the situation demand it. The scene that unfolded before me was nothing short of a nightmare as I took in the grievous state of my comrades. Pops, our leader, was critically injured, his body convulsing on the blood-soaked earth. The beloved corporal, caught in a brutal blast, suffered a devastating wound to his groin. His fellow Marines restrained him, preventing him from witnessing the severity of his injuries as he struggled in agony. In the midst of chaos, our brave radio operator, Lance Corporal Bill Burns, displayed remarkable fortitude. Despite the shock of losing a hand, he relentlessly called for support over his radio, his voice steady even as his lifeblood ebbed away. Nearby, another Marine swiftly tended to Lance Corporal Lee, who had been struck by shrapnel, pressing a battle dressing against the gruesome tear in his abdomen. It was a grim picture. Each member of our squad bore the scars of the devastating Bronco attack. Yet, witnessing the undying courage and brotherhood of my fellow Marines stirred a profound sense of pride and solidarity within me. Their heroism was a beacon of hope in the haze of war. In a display of swift command, Captain Dwyer ordered the AO-10 Bronco to stand down, skillfully averting further disaster. The Bronco pilots, innocent in the unfolding drama, hadn't anticipated our secretive presence. Captain Dwyer, ever astute, had preemptively planned rendezvous points for our patrol. In the aftermath, The Bronco's pilot and co-pilot distanced themselves from the scene, haunted by the enormity of what had unfolded. Amidst the verdant jungle foliage, a Sikorsky UH-34, nimbler than the larger CH-47, descended with care onto the riverbed, its rotors whispering almost conspiratorially to the treetops. Time was of the essence. We needed to airlift our injured comrades swiftly. With a fierce resolve, L.C. Player Burns gripped his arm just above the tourniquet, and I steadied him toward the aircraft. Together, our squad gently carried Pops in his poncho, his pained groans slicing through the charged atmosphere. CPL Lee and Del Johnson, each grappling with their own agony, found the will to move toward their rescue. As the helicopter filled, Chuck Chambliss, poised to lead in my absence, urged me to take the final spot. Guilt gnawed at my conscience as I boarded, leaving my comrades on the ground. The Sikorsky, carrying our wounded, soared towards Da Nang Naval Hospital, determined to prioritize the urgent care of Pops and Burns. Meanwhile, Chambliss and the remaining squad members pressed onward, navigating a treacherous half-mile along the riverbed until a larger CH-46 finally found a suitable clearing for their extraction. Their destination, the USS Sanctuary, where crucial medical care awaited them. The moment our helicopter touched down in Da Nang, the scene erupted into organized chaos. Navy corpsmen, with precision and urgency, rushed to our side, swiftly lifting us onto stretchers. We were hurriedly taken to a nearby triage area, the urgency palpable as they assessed the severity of our injuries. "Who's in the worst shape?" a corpsman shouted over the din. Frantically, I gestured towards Pops and Burns, their injuries grievous, pleading for them to receive immediate care. Once they were whisked away for surgery, they vanished from my sight, later transferred to Japan for advanced treatment, leaving a profound void. As PFC Lee and I sat waiting our turn, a wave of survivor's guilt washed over us. Our wounds were far less severe compared to the horrors others faced. The image of CPL Peters, beaming as he shared a photo of his newborn son, haunted me. He had always been a guiding light, a mentor who didn't deserve the cruel hand dealt by war. Reflecting on this, the stark reality of war struck me. It was only my second day walking on patrol, yet the harsh lessons of Vietnam were already clear. Unbeknownst to me, this brush with death was merely a prelude to the many dangers that lay ahead. Also, it would not be the last time my eyeglasses would be lost. Before heading back to Vandegrift Combat Base, I approached a corpsman at the hospital, seeking a way to shield my parents from any news of my injury. To my relief, he produced a release of information form for me to sign. I would decline notifying them about the ordeal, ensuring they wouldn't worry about my survival for the next 12 months. In just 3 weeks, I made a full recovery, stitches were removed, and I was ready to dive back into my routine duties. Most of my mending unfolded in the familiar surroundings of Vandegrift Combat Base, nestled within our company sickbay area. I took up my usual tasks with a renewed vigor, guarding the perimeter, managing the less than glamorous job of burning shitters, and tirelessly filling sandbags under the relentless sun. Stepping out of the perilous jungle of Vietnam left me craving for a drastic change from life in the infantry. Okay, really, I was scared shitless. In hindsight, I kicked myself for not revealing my adept typing skills to the S1 captain back at headquarters when I arrived in Vietnam. This oversight could have landed me a cushy office job, safely tucked away from the front lines, even at the risk of being dubbed a POAG by my fellow grunts. It was during a casual chat with a Marine stationed in the safer confines of Vandegrift that I first heard of the Civil Action Program, a beacon of hope where Marines worked hand in hand with South Vietnamese villagers, offering them much-needed security. The idea struck a chord with me, promising a shift from dodging dangers in the hostile terrains of I Corps to engaging in something genuinely impactful. Compelled by the promise of making a meaningful difference, I resolved to speak with Sergeant Al Lowe about a transfer, hopeful for a new chapter. Sergeant Al Lowe, sir. What do you want, Wagner? And quit calling me sir, idiot. Sergeant, I'd like to request a transfer to the CAP program. I think it would be very rewarding working with the Vietnamese people. Wagner, you're a dumb shit. What do you know about the Civil Action Program? Well, Sergeant Al Lowe, I know they're embedded in the hamlets and work alongside of the village's people. This would give me a chance to learn more about the Vietnamese culture, and I would enjoy helping them. Wagner, like I said, you're a dumb shit. Do you realize that if you joined a CAP unit, you might be working with NVA sympathizers who would cut your throat in the middle of the night? Your life would be depending on villagers that might turn out to be Viet Cong. Here you have an entire infantry company of Marines looking out for each other. Do you understand what I'm telling you, dumbass? Now get the hell out of my hooch. Yes, sir, Sergeant Al Lowe. Just as I started out the doorway, Sergeant Alo hollered back at me, Wagner! Yes, sir, Sergeant Al Lowe. I heard you did okay out there. You're going to do fine right here, son.